It's time, Cougar Nation. Cougar Tracks. The best season analysis with BYU insider Mitch Harper on KSL NewsRadio and on video every day on the YouTube page for KSL Sports.
Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio. I am your BYU insider Mitch Harper. It's a BYU football game day, Football Friday, as the Cougars get set to take on the West Virginia Mountaineers tonight in Provo. Kickoff at 8:30 p.m. Pre-game begins at 6:30 on KSL NewsRadio. And joining me on this BYU football game day edition of Cougar Tracks, my Cougar Sports Saturday co-host and colleague on the post-game recap shows, Kyle Ireland. Kyle, how you doing today on this BYU football game day?
I'm doing well, Mitch. I am happy to be back at home. We are not on the road this week. It's also a little bit interesting because we have a weekday game as opposed to a Saturday night kickoff, but I expect it to be a fun one between BYU and West Virginia, so I'm excited and ready to roll.
I am very excited as well. It's number 23 BYU who comes into the game 4-0 overall, 1-0 in Big 12 play. West Virginia is limping into this game 2-3 overall, 0-2 in Big 12 play. And when I look at this game, Kyle, I look at the numbers, I look at the stats of this matchup, and to me, BYU has got the clear advantage here in this game. There's no doubt in my mind that BYU is the better football team. They're more than a 19-point favorite in this game. Teams in the Big 12 that have been that large of an underdog or teams who are favored, they're 0-5 in those underdog spots. So West Virginia would kind of be defying the odds since the last 2 years if they could take down BYU in this spot. But your thoughts on this matchup between the Cougs and Mountaineers?
Yeah, I think the one thing for me, Mitch, is the way that we talked about the Colorado game last week. I don't want to have those same kinds of opinions because I thought BYU was going to roll over the Buffs last week, and it was, kind of a slow start for them defensively, especially. And then once they found the rhythm, it seemed like the second half went quite a bit better for the Cougs, but I expect it to be the same kind of script that we thought it was going to be maybe last week, but even easier against the Mountaineers. I think on paper, you look at this matchup and BYU should roll. I mean, this game should be one where BYU easily covers. West Virginia's coming in really, you said limping into this matchup. I mean, they're so hurt at the quarterback position alone, Mitch, that their top two, outlets as far as offense are concerned with the quarterback play, and then also their leading rusher on the season is also another quarterback who's out for this game. I just think that Khalil Wilkins is going to have such a hard time with this BYU defense, who I expect to really take some pride and ownership in what happened in the first half against Colorado to really flip things around, because I think that West Virginia is going to look at the game that BYU played a week ago and try and mimic some of the things that Colorado did against BYU and found success. I expect Wilkins to run the ball quite a bit, and I expect them to try and really, they're kind of a one-dimensional team. And so if BYU is able to shut down West Virginia's running game, I think BYU rolls in this game really pretty easily.
I'm with you. BYU's defense is 7th nationally in the country, but their slow start against Colorado was a little bit surprising how they struggled. We talked in the pregame show last Saturday from Boulder, hey, they're going to use Draylon Miller at running back. Hey, they're going to run Caden Salter. But then in the postgame, even guys like Jack Kelly said that surprised them. I'm thinking, we talked about that in pregame. We kind of expected that, but they were surprised. I thought BYU's defensive line needs to be better out of the gates. I thought they were a little bit underwhelming last week. I thought that was the weakest performance from BYU's defensive line to date this season. So I want to see a strong bounce back performance, and they'll have to slow down a Rich Rodriguez offense. And Rich Rod, of course, is in year one at West Virginia. He's been at West Virginia before in the past when they got them to as high as number 2 in the BCS rankings in 2007 before falling and then exiting to Michigan. This was Rich Rod on his unique connection to BYU in preparation for tonight's game.
Yeah, I've known him a long time. I think we were in the Pac-12 together. Then we played each other. But I've just known him as he's a great guy. He's a really good football coach, but he's a great guy. Everybody in the profession really respects him. He's what the coaching profession can really look to as far as a role model for a lot of younger coaches. So, and he's done a great job there. I think they've invested in their program. They've got a passionate fan base like we do, and he's done a really good job. They've been, I think, the last couple of years they've been really good.
Do you remember anything about your matches with him?
No, it was we played him when I was at Arizona. I think we played him actually in the Cardinal State in Phoenix. It was it wasn't really a neutral. It was a neutral site game. It was I think they beat us 18-16 or something. It was a close game, and I think it was our opener in that one. I think that's maybe the only time I played them. But I was back when I was way back in another life, I guess. When I was at Tulane, we played BYU in the Liberty Bowl, and I was. This is after Tommy had left, and so I was kind of the interim coach for the bowl game, and we played them. And then after the game, Norm Chow, who's a friend of mine, was their offense coordinator, and Lavelle Edwards was their head coach. They invited me to come out and talk some ball with them. And so a few weeks after the bowl game, I went out to Provo and spent 2 or 3 days with them, and got a chance because I wanted to learn from them too. Lavelle was a guru on the passing game, and so was Norm Chow, and so we kind of traded some ideas, and that was a really neat trip. But that was how long ago? 20 years ago, 25.
It was actually about 27, Rich Rod, but who's counting? But I thought that was pretty cool. You know me, Kyle. I love the nostalgia. When I heard Liberty Bowl, I'm thinking to myself, hey, am I completely off of that? I'm pretty sure that was Chris Shelfo was the interim head coach, but he actually was the full-time head coach for Tulane in that game leading up to bowl prep. Rich Rod was, in fact, the interim head coach, and I went into the archives and looked at that Tulane head coaching search after Tommy Bowden. It was Rich Rod, Chris Selfo, and Gary Croton who interviewed for that Tulane job. 3 coaches that got the interview for that, but they ended up going with Chris Selfo. That was a terrible move because Tulane was flying high, undefeated, 12-0, had a high-powered offense, and Rich Rod knows offensive football, but this year they're struggling offensively, 99th nationally at 22 points per game, scoring offense. They're 15th in total offense in the Big 12. I feel like, Kyle, West Virginia is pretty predictable. They're going to try to run the football. I feel like one-dimensional teams bodes well for BYU's defense.
Yeah, I agree, Mitch. And I think that, it was good. Last week, Kalani Sitake talked about this after the game, that BYU was able to face some adversity in that Colorado game. I think that will help them in this matchup against West Virginia. Short week for BYU coming into this game on a Friday night. I think that these guys are going to be locked in. Jay Hill's going to have that defense ready to go from the opening drive, the opening possession for West Virginia. They're banged up. They're needing to find some success. They're going to be a one-dimensional team. I don't expect them to find hardly any success on the outside through the passing game. BYU's cornerbacks have been outstanding this season, Mitch, and really they weren't tested for the first couple of games, and we've seen them when they have been tested, they have been able to make plays. And so BYU, they're, I would say, a little banged up as well, maybe after the Colorado game, just with the grind of, the first Big 12 matchup, Bear Bachmeier taking a bunch of hits in the quarterback run game. I expect maybe the game plan to look a little bit different for BYU this week, because I think the Cougs are actually just going to be able to take things pretty easily. I think it might be more of a vanilla kind of a game. I expect it to be maybe similar to what we saw against Stanford, where BYU wins comfortably, but it's a game that you can kind of walk your way through.
On the injury front, Austin Leausa, who you and I saw at Folsom Field after the game, he was in a sling. He's been removed from the player availability report. He was listed as questionable earlier in the week. Now it would appear that he's good to go. We'll get the final availability report around 7 o'clock Mountain Time, 9 o'clock Eastern tonight from Provo, as far as final who's in, who's out for tonight's game between the Cougs and the Mountaineers, which again kicks off at 8:30. Television broadcast will be on ESPN. And I'm curious, Kyle, what are some stats, some key numbers that you're looking at in this game that are kind of keeping your attention as the Cougs get ready to take on the Mountaineers?
Yeah, I'm looking at BYU's rushing defense. They're ranked 8th nationally with only allowing 76 yards per game, Mitch. And then on the other side, West Virginia is averaging 216 yards per game, which is top 25 in the country. So I really think that's the game right there. Kind of alluded to it earlier. But I just really believe that if BYU is able to stop them on the ground, BYU is also going to be able to, I think, speed up the clock in their own right, because LJ Martin I expect him to have a big game again tonight as well. And I would say that BYU is probably going to run Bear Bachmeier less this week than they did a week ago, but I think it really just comes down to the ground game. BYU is not going to have to do a ton on offense. They're going to be able to control the clock. They're going to be able to dominate the line of scrimmage in this matchup, in my opinion. So really, it just comes down to BYU's front seven really being able to take control, take ownership. You mentioned the BYU defensive line kind of having some struggles a week ago. If they're able to correct those things, especially from the jump, I mean, BYU kind of was on their heels initially a week ago and really had to find some rhythm, find some groove, and take some pride in their play after the first quarter and in a hostile environment. BYU's back at home tonight. I really just expect it to be one of those matchups where this defense gets up for this game, gets up for this matchup, and plays the way that they did the first 3 games of the season.
For me, Kyle, the stat I'm looking at is 19.1%. That's the havoc rate for BYU on defense this season. And I want to see that number go up just a little bit. 19.1 solid, but you typically want that above 20% and up. And havoc is not just sacks, it's tackles for loss, it's interceptions, it's forced fumbles, it's everything. And I think 19.1% solid, but again, I want to see that number go up. And we're expecting to see Khalil Wilkins at quarterback for West Virginia. He gave a little bit of what they're calling a spark in that game against Utah last week for the Mountaineers against the Utes, but really that game was so out of reach that it just seemed like Utah maybe took their foot off the gas a little bit. Wilkins, more of a runner. Which is crazy because talking with the West Virginia insider Keenan Cummings this week, he said Wilkins came in and was someone that really prided himself on his passing abilities, yet he's evolved into just being a runner. We'll see if he can show off that passing ability at all, but I want to just see that havoc number go up. I want to see a couple takeaways. When you got a quarterback and lack of stability at that position, it poses opportunities for BYU's defense to create that havoc. So I look at that 19.1% number. I want to see them be able to get that up above 20% from this game tonight against a Mountaineers team that is really struggling. They have not been competitive in the last 2 games in Big 12 play, and I feel like this is one of those spots where BYU could really put them in their misery because this could be looked at as a season where, well, let's just turn the page if you're Rich Rod to next year and start to build out the forecast for 2026 beyond in this team. What are some players to watch on both sides, BYU and West Virginia, that you're going to keep an eye out for in tonight's game, Kyle?
Yeah, I think that as far as West Virginia is concerned, I think Khalil Wilkins is the obvious one, but since we already discussed him, I'm going to go with Ty Edwards, their running back. He's their second leading rusher on the season. I mentioned 2 of their top rushers. They have Jalen Henderson, who's out this game, and then Jaheim White, who's out for the season. And so those are their other 2 top of their top 3 rushers this season. And so BYU is really going to be able to lock in onto Edwards, who's run for 141 yards this season. And then on the defensive side for BYU, I'm looking to see what Jack Kelly does tonight. He's been outstanding so far this season, Mitch, and I'm interested to see if he's able to get a sack or 2 this evening on Wilkins. Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasker, that duo right there, it's kind of been discussed the last few weeks, but I think that this season is really elevating that duo. Those 2 guys have been so outstanding and have had kind of games of their own this season where they've really been the MVPs for that defense. Obviously, Isaiah Glasker was that for BYU last week, but Jack Kelly's the guy that I'm looking for tonight to see what he does, because really this could end up being, Mitch, where we look back at the end of the 2025 season and it becomes one of those historical seasons where we're like, oh, that was one of the best linebacker duos in BYU football history.
Honestly, I think they're probably the best duo ever already. Honestly, I mean, Jack Kelly and Glasker are legit. And I don't say that lightly because I know the history at this position for BYU. But I think Kelly and Glasgow are the best of the best. They've already combined for 12 tackles for loss this season. Both are in the top 4 in the Big 12, 4 tackles for loss. Jack Kelly is second in sacks this year in the Big 12. Both of those guys are excellent. I think they're going to be some excellent players in the NFL in the future. I do kind of wonder in the back of my mind, this is kind of off topic a little bit, if Isaiah Glasgow is just viewing this year as his final season. It's his redshirt junior season. He technically, with COVID year, well, not COVID year, but he does have the ability to run it back next season. But I almost kind of look at this as his last ride. In many respects, I have to kind of remind myself he does have a year of eligibility remaining, but he's just been so good, and same with Jack Kelly as well. Those are great picks. I think for me, on the West Virginia side of things, I look at Cam Vaughn, wide receiver. You know, if Khalil Wilkins is going to go to the air for West Virginia, Cam Vaughn is top 20 in receiving yards in the Big 12 this season. Most of that, of course, came with Nico Marchiol at quarterback, who kind of weird situation there with Nico, their quarterback. You know, he goes to a foot specialist down in Arizona. Rich Rod's like on his coach show, hey, we got good doctors too. Maybe communicate that info to our doctors. And then reports come out that he's planning on medically redshirting and then probably going to hit the portal when that thing opens up in January. But keep an eye out for Cam Vaughn, Evan Johnson, Shmev. They got to take care of business there and keep him in check. And BYU's pass defense, I think, has been pretty good this season for the Cougars. I think also Fred Perry, West Virginia. He's a West Virginia nickel, one of the best in the Big 12 in tackles. A lot of that work is going to him because teams are getting to that second and third level in West Virginia's defense. So, but keep an eye out for him. And then Chase Wilson, linebacker for West Virginia, probably their best pass rusher, like a Jack Kelly. High up there in the Big 12 in sacks and tackles for loss. So those are some West Virginia guys to watch out for. For BYU, punt return specialist. Tiger Bachmeier struggled last week. Parker Kingston, as I talked to Kelly Papinga earlier this week, it's Parker's job going forward. But what was interesting, when I dive into the numbers on those two players, Tiger Bachmeier is second in the Big 12 in punt return yards, 13.5 average. Parker Kingston's third at 11.9. So despite what would seem like struggles for both of those guys, they've been pretty good on their returns. Now, there's nuance to that. You can't just focus solely on the amount of yards they've returned, those punt returns, because where Tiger was fielding those punts last week was not good. The decision-making to field those punts was not smart. But they're guys that can pop off some big returns, so keep an eye out for them. Defensively, I would also point to Keanu Tanavasa and John Talmoy-Payau. Thought the interior of BYU's defensive line took a little bit of a step back last week. I want to see a strong bounce back from those guys this week. How about bold predictions for you in this game? We'll get to our score prediction a little bit later, Kyle, but bold predictions for this game.
Yeah, I'm going to say LJ Martin runs for 150 yards, a career high tonight against West Virginia, Mitch. Didn't hit 100 yards last week for the first time this season, and so I expect him to get over the century mark tonight. I think that Bear took a lot of hits last week, Mitch. He ran the ball quite a bit, and Colorado's defense really kind of zoned in on LJ Martin, which led to Bear being able to run the ball. And then I think that because of those hits that Bear took last week, they're going to try and take some of those or try and prevent some of those this week. And so I expect LJ Martin to get a nice load of work tonight. And so I want to say that LJ pops off for a career high 150 yards. I think that BYU, it's been an interesting thing, Mitch. We've talked about this a bunch this season where they've had these stepping stones where it's been each week has been a level up in competition. It's been a new thing for Bear Bachmeier to check off as far as going from FCS to a Power 4 program to road game to now Big 12 opener under his belt. He's back at home. The step in competition is now going down for the first time this season against the Mountaineers. And so I'm interested to see how BYU handles that. And I wonder if because of that and the hits and the battle that it was a week ago, if they say, hey, let's utilize LJ Martin. the season rides on LJ Martin, as we've talked about a bunch this season. And so that's why I'm going to say LJ Martin pops off for 150 yards tonight.
15 carries for 58 yards for LJ. Last week kind of felt like maybe a little bit of a pedestrian night for LJ, but when you factor in the amount of attention that Colorado zeroed in on LJ, it freed up Bear Bachmeier. So LJ is one of the
I don't
best
need
running
you
backs.
up in the press box, Mitch, with your binoculars looking for LJ on the sideline, wondering if he's hurt, if he's coming back in the game.
I was worried.
I don't need any of that tonight.
Because at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't care about this game now. I just need to know where LJ is. And then I lose track of him. And then he's back in the huddle, getting ready for the fourth quarter. I'm like, oh, my life is okay. I'm going to survive. I'm all right because LJ is back in the game. And even Aaron Roderick said this week that LJ's good to go. He's back to full strength. Didn't even appear on the availability report. I thought that was noteworthy too, because LJ and Carson Ryan at times got shaken up in that game against Colorado last week, but good to go in that no availability report appearances. So all expectations would be that those guys are going to be ready for tonight, 8:30 kick against West Virginia. For me, my bold prediction, you went to the ground. I'm going to go to the air. I'm going to say Bear Bachmeier has 2 completions of more than 50 yards in this game. So I'm going big. I think that Bear's going to have some big plays through the air. When you look at some of the advanced stats, he hasn't taken many shots down the field this year, and it hasn't been by design. BYU's taking what the defense is giving them, and it's allowed for Bear Bachmeier to be really efficient and really effective in these first 4 games. 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions so far. You love that. This is getting a little bit nitpicky, but I feel like when you're playing a team in West Virginia that doesn't have a great pass defense, their defense in general is ranked 14th in the Big 12, this is an opportunity to maybe stretch that field and get a little bit of proof of concept that, hey, Bear, you can turn to this and do this at a high level and give another data point to these opposing defenses to have to scout and scheme for this in the arsenal of Bear Bachmeier. So I'm going to say 2 passes of more than 50 yards, and some of that could, of course, be maybe yards after catch. And a lot of BYU's production through the air has been yards after catch this season, but I think Bear's going to show off that arm a little bit and have some big completions through the air. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like that. We saw in the East Carolina game, they started off the game with that shot down the far side of the field to Parker Kingston that was incomplete, but it's not like they haven't tried to stretch the field with Bear and his arm the last couple of weeks. I will say that there's been a few times where I've questioned maybe Bear's arm strength and his throwing motion out of some of those deep shots down the field where he's been lucky to have not gotten picked off. I think that when he has his feet set, he's got time in the pocket, he throws a really nice ball, but he hasn't turned the ball over yet this season, Mitch. He's got 10 total touchdowns with 0 turnovers. I think that one thing that I'd like to see is him to be able to stretch the field, like you say, take some shots down the field, but also not turn the ball over at the same time. I was interested, Aaron Roderick earlier this week on Tuesday, he was asked about maybe BYU maybe having some slow starts to the game. And he thought that they didn't have a slow start on offense against Colorado. It was really just the defensive side of things is how I read into it. But he thought the Bears started the game off really well and it wasn't concerned about that at all. And so
yeah, I disagree. I disagreed with that with A-Rod because ultimately you weren't keeping up on the scoreboard with Colorado.
Yeah.
So in theory, it was a slow start. And then you factor in East Carolina. They didn't score an offensive touchdown that first half. It was Evan Johnson that got them going. So it's a little nitpicky, sure, but you can't deny they're not scoring touchdowns out of the gate. Like, I want to see tonight BYU score touchdowns first drive, hammer West Virginia, and give them no hope of hanging around in this game.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you're down 14-0 against Colorado. Your offense is only up 6-3 against East Carolina before that Evan Johnson pick 6 before the half, and then you didn't score an offensive touchdown until the second half. I think that BYU, in order to prevent and really to become what Aaron Roderick is saying there and not having a slow start, it needs to not be a habitual thing. BYU needs to have a fast start tonight. I would like to see them score a touchdown on their opening offensive possession against the Mountaineers. they really do need to have something where it's a confidence building game as far as this offense is concerned, because this defense is gonna, I really do believe that they're gonna be able to shut down this West Virginia offense pretty easily tonight. And so BYU does need to be able to find success early and often as far as their offense is concerned. Bear Bachmeyer, I like the deep shots there. You say two completions of 50 yards tonight. I'm interested as far as that's concerned, Mitch, to see where those completions come to. If it's a guy like Carson Ryan, who you mentioned a little banged up at the Colorado game, but Chase Roberts has been pretty outstanding. I feel like his drop against Colorado, a lot was made of that, and then he had an outstanding game after that. So I think that Chase is going to be a guy that you can rely on. Carson Ryan has been one of those guys that's been proven, but I also think that they were able to use LJ Martin out of the backfield. So as far as your bold prediction is concerned, I'm really fascinated to see who those completions end up going to.
Let's take a quick break, and then on the other side, Kyle, you caught up with BYU passing game coordinator Fesi Sitake. It's Cougar Tracks on a BYU football game day. BYU and West Virginia, right here on KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio.
BYU getting ready to take on West Virginia back at home, and I'm with BYU passing game coordinator and wide receiver coach Fesi Sitake. Fesi, you guys had a slow start against Colorado, and then it really kind of ramped up there in Boulder. When you went back and looked at the film, what were the things that maybe slowed the offense down coming out of the gates?
I think we just didn't execute like we've shown in the first several weeks. Just couldn't click, man. I think that was just, we let the start of the game, it had a ripple effect. And great, we talk about our guys all the time. Great teams have to overcome things play by play. And I think a slow start just carried on a little bit too long. The good thing is the guys never wavered. Like every time they came off the sidelines, it was positivity, it was upbeat. Luckily, we were able to not get down by too much. We were able to come back, have some flashes of what we know we can do, what we've shown throughout the season, and that was able to help us march back. But I think it was just the idea of letting a slow start through all phases of the game affect us more plays than it needed to.
After the game, Kalani mentioned that you guys hadn't really faced adversity so far this season, and it was a good way to kind of get punched in the mouth but still come out with a victory. How important is it for your team to face adversity and then to, it's that kind of cliche of you'd rather learn from a win than learn from a loss. But how important was it for you guys to face adversity on the road, Big 12, first game of the season? What did that mean to you guys overall?
It's critical. And as a coach, sometimes you let past seasons trickle into the season, the present moment. A lot of these guys haven't gone through adversity. And so sometimes it's like when we're going through adversity, we're able to respond to that. People who have history here, we have a lot more reference points, playing here at BYU. There's a lot of guys who are new here. And so it's important for them to go through their own adversity as well. We have to lean upon those experiences, not be too content, but to be able to, draw from those moments of adversity that we've had, help lift the guys, and that's teammates, that's coaches, and that's everyone. And so, I think it's important, like you said, you don't want them, but they're happening. Like I think sometimes you paint a picture that's too beautiful for these guys. If we do this, we can get a fast start and jump on it. And we didn't do that, but that's what happens a lot in football. And I think it's that balance of, you got to give these guys confidence, but let them know that we're playing against people who want it really bad as well. And you have to be ready for those, adverse moments. And I think our guys, this was a perfect game where they're able to learn from that now and hopefully respond a little bit quicker when adversity happens. And so I'm glad we're able to learn that lesson, even though it was a little close, a little stressful. We have to have those because that is life, and that's what we preach to these guys as well. So
how do you prevent those slow starts from becoming a habitual thing? Because I think a lot of teams, you come out with a game plan, you have your scripted plays, and then you obviously have to make adjustments off of that. Is there maybe like a dynamic that you and Aaron Roderick have to be able to move away from those scripted plays to start a game where you're like, okay, well, this is what they're showing us and we need to move into this phase?
Yeah, we have A-Rod used this last game as a perfect example on our staff meeting on Monday, offensive staff. He just mentioned how appreciative he was and how proud he was of just the communication immediately once adversity was striking and we weren't hitting on all cylinders. So all hands on deck, man. It's just a matter of everyone communicating, being humble, realizing, hey, these plays aren't working for whatever reason, whether it's because they're doing scheme we didn't anticipate, whether it's because we're not able to execute on a little nuance of a play, whatever it is, we all have to have the humility and the clear mind to talk about it, and to communicate in a stressful environment, when things are going a million miles per hour. And I thought we did a great job of that. And so it's all hands on deck. Everyone did their part in just kind of expressing what their opinion is, what we need to do to get out of that funk. And I think we did a great job doing that.
A couple last things for you, Fesi. Going to your position group with the wide receivers, you obviously lost JoJo Phillips a few weeks back, and it's been interesting because you've seen a number of guys that are young and inexperienced really step up, and even guys like Carson Ryan, who weren't a part of the program in the past, have made their impact shown in the last couple of games. Can you talk about the diversity within that wide receiver? And also, you've got LJ Martin coming out of the backfield, Carson Ryan as a tight end, but you've got Chase, who's super experienced, and then you've got a young guy like Cody Hagan, who's making big plays for you guys as well.
Yeah, it's a hard dynamic to work through, but it's an awesome one too, though. That's, to me, that's part of the, I don't know if I wouldn't call it adversity, but just something you have to work through. That's going to make you better. It's going to refine you. Everyone knows, no matter how long you've been here, if it's Chase, who's a seasoned player at BYU, if it's Carson, who's a seasoned player but first year at BYU, or if it's Cody Hagan or one of these younger guys, no matter what, we have a young quarterback, true freshman at the helm right now, and we have to understand his language and verbiage and his timing and his cadence, and latch on to him and his leadership as well, and then be there for him as well if he needs that. All of that stuff is just it's critical. In our room with that dynamic, there's all these guys who bring different experience from whatever schools they were from or what they've learned here. I just think every week, part of it, I know it's cliche, but Bear's just going to keep getting better. Our offense is, because all those things are just going to keep, we're going to be working together and trying to be as cohesive as we can. So it's a tough dynamic with some new bodies and things to learn from. But like I said, I think in the long term, if handled right, it can be one of the very reasons we're consistent and as efficient as we want to be.
You mentioned Bear, obviously, is now kind of taking each step where he's, played his first game, FCS, FBS, Power 4 program, now first Big 12 win. He hasn't turned the ball over at all, double-digit total touchdowns so far. And it's been expressed by you and A-Rod and Kalani about just the decision-making, that he continues to make good decisions. He's continuing to stack those things day by day. After the win, Deion Sanders in his post-game remarks called Bear phenomenal. That was the way he described his play. What other adjectives would you use to describe Bear through his first month as BYU's quarterback?
Poised is a huge one I've used a lot of times for him. He just does not get phased. He doesn't get rattled. And I think especially at that quarterback position, there's so many you can be ultra talented, but if you're fragile emotionally, you can see that, and teams can capitalize on that and expose you. Bear never gets way too high. He never gets too low. I see excitement even after drives when he comes off. I'm pumping my chest and so excited. And he's just kind of a little smile, straight face on him. If we have a bad drive or something like that, or he makes a bad throw and he comes off, he's got the same demeanor. That's hard, man. You gotta be wired a certain way, and I think you can attribute a lot of that. He's even mentioned it to just kind of his upbringing, the way he grew up with his siblings, the dynamic there, his parents. He's just such a high achiever. All that lends itself to being a really, really poised player, and he is tough, man. He's so tough. He reminds me of a guy, back at Weber State, who I had the blessing of coaching, and just so resilient, hit after hit, mentally tough, physically tough, emotionally tough. I love it. And so his brightest days are ahead. And like you said, he's a team guy. He protects the ball. He doesn't make dumb decisions. He's not worried about stats. And then I will say too, A-Rod talks about it all the time, that ball security, that no turnovers thing, it's an 11-man deal. And Bear should get a lot of credit. But the O-line in terms of protection, we have multiple games with 0 sacks given up. It's an 11-man deal. Everyone has their part in making sure we don't have any turnovers, and that's one of the key indicators of why we've been able to be so successful so far.
Thanks for your time, Fesi. Best of luck against West Virginia.
Appreciate you, Kyle. Thanks.
Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube. Great stuff, Kyle, with Fesi Sitake. That was an insightful interview with Coach Sitake, Kalani Sitake's technically cousin, but they view themselves as brothers. Kalani and Fesi. So insightful stuff there. Poised is the adjective he used for Bear Bachmeier. You agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to have a true freshman come out and play the way that Bear Bachmeier has through his first 4 games, including 2 road starts, I think it's been outstanding for BYU to have that kind of play from a quarterback that, I mean, if you go back and if you were to compare apples to apples, Jake Retzlaff's first 4 games from last season to Bear's first 4 games this season, you take Bear's stats over Jake's from a season ago. And so I think that the fact that Bear has been able to make those good decisions, the phenomenal adjective that Dion gave, it was like, oh, that's a splashy word. But I do think that Fesi's right. I mean, Bear has been very poised, and he's had more of a veteran kind of a leadership mentality and kind of demeanor about him that I wouldn't have expected from a true freshman who's young and, playing with guys on the team that are 4 or 5 years older than him.
Let's put a bow on this show and give our score predictions for BYU and West Virginia.
Score prediction. Will BYU come out on top? It's time for Mitch's score prediction for the next game.
And Kyle's score prediction, too. Mitch and Kyle giving you score predictions for BYU and West Virginia. Just a quick programming note, too. Kyle and I usually hold it down on Cougar Sports Saturday, noon to 3 on weekends. That's not going to be the case here this weekend because General Conference for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So no day after recap show from us. We're going to be off the air. We're going to pass the baton to General Conference. I don't even know if we should say pass the baton. They're saying, hey, enough's enough of you guys. We're holding it down on News Radio. But anyway, so just quick note on that. But we will have a post-game show after tonight's game between BYU and West Virginia. What's your score prediction, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm going to say BYU wins this game 41-13, Mitch. I think that you look at the last 2 games, West Virginia has allowed Kansas and Utah to each score more than 40 points. And so I'm going to say that happens for a 3rd consecutive game for the Mountaineers. And then I think BYU's defense only allows a late touchdown. So they're going to have a couple early field goals, I'll say, through the first 3 quarters, and then maybe get a late touchdown when BYU's already putting a bow on this thing, as you like to say. So, yeah, I'm going to go 41-14. BYU rolls easily in a rout.
I love it. I'm going to go kind of similar. I'm going to say a weird, quirky score for West Virginia. I'm going to say BYU 38, West Virginia 16. Something weird's going to happen for them. They miss maybe like an extra point because bad teams usually do that where they have weird scores. So I'm going to say 38-16. Cougs get it done, and they go to 5-0 for what would be only the 9th time in program history if they got that done. And look, maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse here, but if they get it done to 5-0, it would be the 4th 5-0 start in Kalani Sitake's era at BYU. More than Lavelle Edwards, Kyle. Lavelle Edwards only had 3 5-0 starts in his time, his 29 years as BYU's head coach.
It's impressive. I think that
it's got to happen tonight, but
yeah, Kalani's starting to get to that territory where he's at that 10-year mark, this season. It's where Bronco had a lot of success in his double-digit seasons as BYU's head coach, but Kalani's getting to that point where he's winning some of these big games. He's also in the Big 12. And so he's getting to that mark where I think at this point, clearly BYU's maybe 2nd greatest coach, if that's the moniker you want to put on it. I do think that, Lavelle obviously has the national championship. And so that's always going to be something that, is hard to overcome. But Kalani, it's really been impressive to see what he's done in his tenure as BYU's head coach. And, to be able to have a 5-0 start, I think a lot of fans take that for granted, Mitch. I really do. It's been something where it's like, oh, maybe you look back to 2020 with Zach and the COVID season and just think like, oh, the competition. Like, it's hard to win football games at the FBS level, let alone the Big 12 level. And so really what Kalani's been able to do each of the last 2 seasons has been really remarkable.
If BYU can get that win tonight, it would be a strong start once again for the Cougars, and get them off to another strong start for this season. Big thanks, Kyle, for hopping in on this game day edition, because usually we do this sort of thing on Saturday game days on Cougar Sports Saturday, but we get to enjoy our weekends after tonight. It's going to be a late night, 8:30 kick. We'll probably be there. Let's put some real quick over-under. I'm going to put you on the spot. Over-under 1 a.m. Kalani gets to the podium for the press conference tonight.
I'm going to say, I think I'll get there before. I don't know if that's under. Is that under?
I guess an under, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go under. I think that I think we're going to have a nice running clock tonight, Mitch.
Ooh, okay.
Hopefully we get out of this thing at a nice hour. I hope that really what I hope is I get home before I did after the Stanford game. I think I went to bed at like 4 a.m. that day.
Yes.
Last week, I think after our post-game reaction, I think the last time I looked at the clock was like 4:30 in the morning. So maybe we look at it in this a different way, Mitch, because we don't have Cougar Sports Saturday tomorrow at noon. We're going to say that the post-game, it's just an 8-hour earlier edition of Cougar Sports Saturday. It's a shortened edition, but early in the morning.
I agree. Enjoy the morning general conference waffles and listen to our post-game reaction. I think that would be a perfect Saturday for all of you. But again, he's Kyle Ireland. You can follow him on X at Kyle Ireland. Follow me, Mitch_Harper. Follow KSL Sports at KSL Sports on all the socials. Like this video on YouTube. It would be greatly appreciated. And subscribe to Cougar Tracks and Cougar Sports Saturday podcast feeds wherever you get your podcasts. Cougs in action tonight. We'll have you covered on KSLSports.com.